about that.
I'd like to call to order the special budget meeting of the Delaware County Board of Commissioners. And the date is November 13th, 2019. And our presenters today are Rob Riley, Deputy Chief Engineer, and Tiffany. Hi, welcome. Yeah. You can begin.
Okay, well, good afternoon. Thank you for having us, allowing us to present our budget. First, want to recognize Tiffany Jenkins. Tiffany was really instrumental in helping prepare this budget this year. A lot of my responsibility involves, overseeing the office operations and dealing with our capital projects. And so Tiffany was very helpful in getting the numbers in the right places in the budget, and I want to thank her for that. She worked closely with Brad Lutz and Karen First, so that's the result of that is what you have in front of you. So my plan was to talk kind of first in general about how our budget is structured, and then I can get into some level of detail talking about our various expenditures. So I'll start with basically how our budget is structured. We have essentially four main sources of revenue. The first source, which basically funds our operations and routine maintenance, is the gas tax and the motor vehicle license fees. As you know, both of those sources recently received an increase. The gas tax was increased starting this past July. Those revenues are already flowing in. Starting last month, we saw the increased revenues. And then your board earlier this year approved a $5 permissive license fee increase that will begin in January. And so those additional revenues are reflected in our revenue report, our projections for next year. Second source of revenue, and this is our major source, is the sales tax. We receive basically one half of the 3/4% sales tax. So 3/8 of 1%. That generates on the order of $19.8 million, 19.7. That really funds our capital improvement program, our large projects, in addition to some from our gas and motor vehicle fees. The third source is charges for services we provide to both other local government agencies. That includes townships, some to villages. We sell salt to villages, cities. We do a lot of road maintenance activities on behalf of townships that they reimburse us for. And the other component of that is development, inspection, and review fees. So when we receive submittals for new subdivision plans, we review those plans, and we also provide inspection for those new roads. That amounts to roughly about $1.7 million per year. That's generally stable. The services we provide to other agencies, that's pretty stable. Development revenue goes up and down as the economy goes, but that's pretty high right now. And then the fourth source is grant funding, and that's on a project-by-project basis. That there's really no predictability to that, other than we generally get at least one OPWC project funded per year, but the federal projects come and go. We may have years where we have 2 or 3 federal projects. Some years we won't have any. So that's kind of at a high level of our revenue sources. In terms of expenditures, there's a couple different major categories we group our expenditures in, and probably the best place to look at, in front of you should have a packet that looks like this. This is our 5-year financial forecast and project plan. On the first sheet, the 8.5 by 11 sheet, you'll see at the top our revenues. I just described the motor and gas, the sales tax, and then we have also some TIF and special assessment revenues that we'll start to see next year. We've actually seen some of those already. One of those sources is the Slate Ridge TIF that's already in place for the Mount Carmel site. We actually just recently processed a transfer or reposting of expenditure to use some of that money for the Home Road project. And then you can see below, we have various different reimbursements and other sources of revenue. I'll come back to the bond revenues that's highlighted in yellow, so I won't forget that. Down in the brown section, this highlights our expenditures. So that, we have a couple different major categories. The first is our operation and maintenance. $9.7 million is our projected expenditures for next year, and that's reflected in our budget request. So that covers everything from salaries, benefits, for our staff, as well as kind of our routine road maintenance items, mowing in the summer, berming, minor pavement repairs, minor culvert repairs, and then in the winter, snow plowing, buying salt, and so forth, keeping the office utilities on and that sort of thing. So that amounts to about the $9.7 million figure. That is offset by the other, the operation revenue I described earlier. The motor and gas fund is primarily what pays for that. The second category would be our capital expenses and our project expenses. We are projecting $33.8 million next year in that group. The largest source of that is our projects, what we spend on our road and bridge projects. And projects that we plan to spend that on, I've got highlighted on the second sheet, the large sheet. Those are highlighted in yellow. There's about 15 projects, I think. And these are the major projects. We also have a handful of other projects that don't appear on here. Those are the smaller projects under $100,000. We don't show on this list, but it starts with our annual road improvement program, resurfacing. We're projecting about a $3.5 million construction contract, and then $400,000 for testing and inspection on that, for a total of $3.9 million. We have a traffic signal project, various different intersection projects, and then some major roadway corridors. I'm not going to go into detail on every one of those. If you'd like to peruse that, and if you have any questions on any of this, please feel free to contact me or Tiffany. But in total, those expenses next year are around $32 million. And that is primarily out of it consumes all the sales tax that's available for next year, nearly all of it. And then a little bit of our gas and motor fund will supplement that program as well. So, and then we will be providing some grants to townships and cities, as we've done in the past, and your board recently revised the grant enhancement program, increased that funding, which we're projecting about $800,000, and then $400,000 to the TID as you've done recently. So that's a really quick. That was a lot of information quickly, but our budget is relatively complicated. We have so many different funding sources and a lot of different places that those funds go to. So I'd be happy to go into detail as you'd like me to, but I don't want to tell you more information than you need because it's on paper. But I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
The ones in yellow are the ones you're hoping to do in 2020.
That's correct.
Now, just a question. There was discussion 3 months ago regarding this Concord roundabout. I've heard nothing else about it. Is that off the table for the time being?
That is on hold for now. We had originally planned on building that in 2021. We have probably pushed that back till at least 2022 for the moment.
We'll have another conversation on that, I assume, before
Yes.
anything.
How much revenue are you getting out of the gas tax increase?
The gas tax increase will be about a $1.5 million increase. My understanding is that, and that's actually flowing right now.
It started.
It'll amount to about $1.5 million
Per year.
Per year. That's correct.
That's the county's share, it doesn't include the townships.
That's
cities,
correct.
et cetera.
Yeah, so that's about a 62% increase over over previous. And then the license, motor vehicle license fee revenue is about another 1.2 million. I believe that follows it trails by 3 months, so when the registrations start in January, we won't see those revenues till April, so we won't get the full 1.2 million next year.
Is the money coming in at the schedule you're expecting on the gas tax increase?
It is, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we're seeing exactly what they projected. Yep.
Any other questions? Administrator Fromer.
Yeah, Rob, are you, on your sales tax revenue projections, are you using what the auditor, or are you looking at our historical?
I think we used what the auditor provided. Yeah.
Because I think historically, we've come in, higher than what was.
I think it's a
what was
good number to
projected.
use, though, be conservative.
Yeah,
Yeah.
to be conservative.
But didn't the auditor just change that as well? Increased it a little bit? So I don't know if you're using the older number or the newer dated number. It is a new number.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a new number this week, wasn't it? Or this week?
Very recent.
Maybe last week, it was recent.
As far as capital, are you guys, how are you are you doing any critical path scheduling on the expense side? Because when you over anticipate capital spending, we do that a lot in our budget because capital projects never go as quick as we think. It can look really lopsided, and a lot of it, tends to flow to the next year. I was looking at this schedule and I was trying to look, but it looks like you're kind of chunking whole projects next year, and I know the reality of that's not going to be the case. Is that?
Right, so that's right, Mike. We don't necessarily go into cash flow forecasting month by month. That would get extraordinarily difficult.
Sure. No, I understand that.
Given the uncertainty with construction schedules. But in terms of year by year, the first sheet I gave you you can see a summary of our cash position at the end of each year. Currently, we're in a really strong position with expecting about a $31 million carryover in total, and that's about $14 million in the sales tax, 15.5 in the motor and gas, and then some other funds. That will remain strong for the next few years. I'll say this about the plan. Assuming everything goes as we hope it will, we can get all this work done. It's inevitable that some projects will slip. That's also offset by there may be some projects that we find out a month from now that we need to get accomplished that aren't on here yet. And so there's some of that going on. You can see in the green row on that first page, the ending balances, we're showing 0 at the end of 5 years. I'm not concerned about that, and the reason is, again, some of these project schedules will slip. It's just the reality. Things will happen that delay these projects. And then also, I said I'd come back to the yellow, the bond revenues on the first page. We will have 2 really major projects in 2024 that we will very likely need to issue bonds to cover. And one of those projects could be funded with a TIF revenue bond from Slate Ridge. That's the Home Road overpass, the extension overpass on the railroads. What we're showing on the sheet is a $12 million bond to fund the construction of that project. And then the Big Walnut interchange showing $11.6 million. Those will probably be sales tax bonds, revenue bonds. So those represent kind of the minimum, which balances our budget to 0 after 5 years. We could always borrow more if we need to create, we don't want to have $0, obviously, in our accounts because we're continually spending money, but we do have some flexibility there, and then also the fact that we know that some projects will probably slip.
Any updates on the Big Walnut interchange?
So the latest update I can give you is that we are currently waiting on ODOT to perform some additional traffic modeling, and it relates to the proposal we have would involve limiting the amount of traffic that gets on I-71, because there's, what the traffic models show is there's a lot of traffic that wants to use this new interchange. And it's so much that you can't, during that morning rush hour, if you let everyone that wants to use the interchange use it, it will probably degrade 71 to the point where it's bumper to bumper going southbound. So we're going to have to meter that on-ramp. ODOT is basically analyzing that to see what that effect will be on the local road system. We're behind schedule on where I thought we would be with that analysis, but it's really out of our hands. That's something that ODOT does internally. So that's the current status, waiting on some additional traffic modeling.
You think we're making any progress with ODOT?
I think we'll know very shortly whether we are or not.
Okay.
Depending on the outcome of this modeling, it's very
Okay.
likely we'll have to have some higher level discussions with ODOT.
Okay, just keep us in the loop on that.
I will.
If there's anything we can do to help.
Thank you.
Okay.
Is there going to be some MORPC dollars there as well?
Yes, we are planning on applying to MORPC for funding for that project, and then we've already previewed with ODOT's track that we'll be asking for about $15 million, probably next year, assuming the project is moving ahead at that point.
Okay.
Rob, what was the, I knew you mentioned it last year, what was the criteria that makes your guys' repair to be service and charges versus capital? Because that actually, it's interesting, that throws our entire county budget. When you look, it looks like services and charges have gone up significantly.
Yeah, thank you for that, Mike. We, actually, within the last week or so, we've made some revisions to our budget, and that's reflected in what you're looking at. But we had previously discussed with the auditor's office changing our accounting method for road and bridge projects. There's what they call the modified approach. Rather than when you do work on a pavement, rather than capitalize that work over its expected lifespan, you can simply expense that in the current year and say you're going to keep maintaining it at that level. It's basically, the result of that is it shows up as a service and charge versus a capital outlay. We've actually gone backwards. We're going to stay with the current method. So those expenses, what we originally submitted as services and charges, those have gone back to capital outlays. So sorry for that, but
That would have looked, Brad looked like he just cut a bunch of stuff out of the budget, so.
yeah. Well, that too, but
Okay,
Any other questions?
thanks, Rob.
Yeah, just big picture, you're bringing in 35 to 40 million a year in revenues, and you have 202 million in revenue over the next 5 years, but that includes 60 million of debt. So the non-debt revenue is about 142 million, and you're proposed to spend about 234 million. So that ends up being 90 million more. Your capital spending and other, your maintenance and administrative costs are about 90 million more than the projected spending.
we've got about 23
Projected revenue, I mean.
23 million in debt, so about 37
Oh, yeah,
of
right,
that last
right,
year,
right.
so.
Yeah, I was backing out the whole 60 million.
Yeah.
2024. So it's 170 million roughly of revenue.
Yep.
Recurring revenue, and then 30 or 23 million. So, and then over the 5 years, you end up, with basically zero cash, at the end of the 5 years, assuming all the projects come to fruition. So I think the point I'm making is we're spending a lot of money, to improve and expand our road system and bridges and so on. And we have a number of revenue sources, but even the revenue sources we have even won't keep up on a regular basis with the planned spending. So, it just underscores the need for a lot of work on our roads and just how much they cost versus the funding that we have readily available. And hey, I'm not opposed to debt, and debt makes sense because we can do to manage it very well, but it just is very expensive to maintain and increase the road system here. So, not really a question, but just an
Comment.
observation, yeah.
And I have an observation along that line as well. We've got a lot of our roads are newer. Down the road, we're going to have to start going back and repair and to maintain. And are we setting aside any funds? Are we talking about setting aside any funds for that? Because that's inevitable. I guess that's a comment and a question, I guess.
That's a great point because, one of the examples we used recently in a presentation, I can't remember which one, but, take Old State Road, for example, from Polaris up to Orange Road, which we recently widened. 20 years ago, that cost maybe $15,000 a mile because we could probably get away with a chip seal, maybe longer than 20 years ago, but you get the point. It was relatively inexpensive to maintain that road. Now to resurface just 1 mile of that from Powell Road to Orange Road would be about $350,000. So our maintenance expenses will go up considerably in the future as we're taking on more pavement surface area, and the gas tax and the license fee increases recently are really those were instrumental in making sure that we won't be in a situation where we can't maintain what we're building. We will be able to maintain what we're building. That said, with the gas tax in particular, one of the things that the counties and townships and local agencies had asked the state legislature to do was to index that to inflation, recognizing that, the buying power of the current dollar will not be what it is in 5 years. They did not do that, and so at some point in the future, don't know when, but there will need to be another increase if we as an industry keep on the same model of taxing gasoline consumption versus some other revenue source. But the answer to your question, Commissioner, is I'm confident we'll be able to maintain what we have. That will grow increasingly more difficult in the out years of our program as, we'll lose.
Sure that we are aware of that balance. It's going to be down the road.
I think our program will change over time, where we have probably, if not the largest, one of the largest capital programs in the state in terms of counties, what we do, what we're building. That can't continue forever. At some point, there's just not going to be enough money to keep adding to our infrastructure. So we'll shift into a more of a maintenance and operation mode. But currently, we're adding capacity, and that's what we need to do. So.
And the bonding in 2024 regarding the bridge, is that the year we project that will likely start?
Yes. Yes.
I guess when you think of Delaware County being probably still the fastest growing county in the state, one of the, 12th in the nation, that this is part of it. I mean, more people moving and there's growth moving up north. So it's just part of what we're seeing and what we have to make certain that we're taking care of. And so that's challenging. But you're doing a lot, a heck of a lot. And oh boy,
Yeah.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
And it's a good time to point out, we're I don't know if we're typical of any other county. We're unique among counties, I think, but if you look at an urban county like Franklin County, so much of their area is incorporated by Columbus. The county really has very little to no involvement in
Right.
the infrastructure inside the city versus us, where so much of our growth is in the unincorporated areas. So
That's a
that
good
puts a
point.
demand on our operation as well as
Right,
yours. So,
right.
that's.
We see the city of Delaware struggling to pass a road tax, and so, which failed, and so, yeah, challenging. Anything else?
A question about the TID. You've got in your plans to support the TID with about $400,000 a year, I think. Yes. Did you include those projects that the TID might do in the list of projects?
I didn't, well, yes and no. For the most part, we would anticipate doing the engineering and potentially the land purchase will show up on this list. The construction of those projects will show up on I have basically a list that looks just like this for the TID, and that will primarily show the construction phase of those projects. Just kind of the way things are going, we think we'll probably engineer these projects as part of our county engineers program, but make the decision how we want to build them, and then that's where they'll appear. But yeah, we are showing $400,000 per year to the TID, and then on the larger page, you can see in green, kind of the light green color, those are the projects as of now we anticipate using the TID to construct. At two of those projects, we would actually anticipate using the TID cash. The other projects that show zero, those will probably be agreement projects where your board is providing funding directly to the TID for that particular project. But at least two of those projects, we would expect to use TID's money.
One more question I have. We get asked frequently, the southern interchange, have you heard any more about that?
There's not much activity at the moment, and basically what my understanding of the issue is, there really needs to be a development to create some additional revenue so that the engineering can be completed for the first phase of that interchange. The last discussion we had with ODOT really didn't amount to much because there's not the critical mass at this point to move that interchange forward. And so, to my knowledge, it's somewhat on hold pending a development that can generate the TIF revenue to help pay for that first phase.
Well, the dollars that were set aside to be used, either the current interchange or that interchange, if nothing happens over the next few years, are those going to be used for the current interchange, or there's just so little we could do there?
What I've heard from ODOT is they don't plan on using that money for the current interchange. I think they're still anticipating at some point they will be used on a new interchange, but I don't know what the time period will be, at what point ODOT will have to make the decision that, hey, we need to put some more money into the existing interchange. I think we're several years away from really even considering that.
Okay. Thank you, Tiffany, too, for all your work on this. This is, very, very helpful.
Yeah, well laid out.
Thank you very much. If there's no further questions on our county engineer's budget, I want to introduce our Soil and Water District.
All right.
Just echo some statements I know you've heard Chris make in the past, but I'll say again, we have such a close relationship with Soil and Water that we kind of think of them as part of our office, another department, and so that's how closely we work with them. So I'll let these guys come up, and
Okay.
they're the ones with the sport coats today, so.
All right.
We must have some good information for you.
Great example.
You must have a lot of, it's engineers, it's blue sport coats, you guys. Yeah, come on, guys, you guys got
Thank you both.
Rob and Chris and I have the blue sport coats. We've got that, so.
Welcome, whenever you're ready, Scott.
So I'll just couple introductions, I think probably everybody knows, with starting myself, Scott Stevens, Administrator with the Delaware Soil and Water Conservation District. Also have with me Bonnie Daly, our Deputy Administrator, and Brett Bacon, our, he does everything. He's the project manager and kind of the internal administrative things, some of the budgeting items and so forth. So also Susan Cabay, our fiscal officer for the office, and then Steve Sheets, one of our longtime board members. I think you've probably all met. So,
Thank you. Thank you for coming.
so I'll start there. You should hopefully have a sheet that will just some basic highlights there on the front. Is it in your? If not, I brought copies here.
3-year budget to actual comparison?
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, the 1-3 high, and that, we'll start with the district special fund budget, our normal operating dollars. And if you take a look at that, the bottom, I'll start, there's 3 lines on there really that I think are probably the most important, or that I'll highlight. The first one being that bottom one, kind of that orange or pink color, I don't know, there at the bottom. That's the line item that would show the local grant or the appropriation that we'd receive from the commissioner's office. So that's obviously, you can see we've held that flat from last year in our request, and that's largely predicated on the yellow line. I don't know, many of you are aware that the Soil and Water Conservation Districts, ours and across the state, we saw a significant increase in our state match or state appropriations. We actually have an increase this year of about $143,000, which was honestly shocking. We've gone for the last, two bienniums, or 6 bienniums, 12 years, that we saw that number steadily decrease. So the new governor of the administration has really stepped up and filled a huge gap. And we were in this county very fortunate, all the opportunity that we had there and the great support that we have locally. A lot of soil and water districts were really starting to really fall, kind of fall down or really miss that state match dollars. So that's been a great thing. Obviously, with those increase in dollars, there comes some responsibility that goes along with that. That wasn't just, hey, congratulations, you've been doing a great job, here's some extra cash to deal with. I'm sure you've heard the discussion of the H2 Ohio funds and how that'll go. We don't have a lot of details at this point, but certainly as that's made available and that will be rolled out to the public, soil and water conservation districts, not only with the dollars that ODA, the Department of Agriculture, would see out of that. We obviously have partnerships with the Division of Wildlife and OEPA, or Ohio EPA as well. There's going to be a lot of expectations put on soil and water districts to put that money out into the public, whether that be financial incentives to landowners, or there's a multitude of things that are being discussed. So we're all kind of on the edge of our seats at this point to see where that will take us. But it will be, if that can actually come to fruition the way it's been discussed, that will be an unprecedented opportunities to leverage grant funds, federal funds. Just I've been with the district almost 30 years at this point, and this has not been seen in the past.
Oh my gosh!
So
Okay.
It'll be quite a ride if it actually comes together, and a great opportunity when we think about all the water quality issues that are faced across the state. You can't watch the news locally or nationally and not hear about the challenges of Lake Erie and beyond that to the Ohio River and other bodies of water. So we'll stay tuned. More to come.
Yes.
there.
Yeah.
So, then the green line would be the charges for services A, the 4230. That's funds that are reimbursement to the conservation district for our activities in the drainage maintenance program, kind of that primary partnership with the county engineer's office and your office as well. So with that would be about 55% of all the staff time at the district is devoted to the drainage maintenance activities. We have about 6 or so full-time staff, but then there's a percentage of Brett's time, my time, Bonnie's time, a couple of the other staff that we would devote to that, kind of more on an intermittent or as needed basis, not on obviously a full-time everyday basis. So with that, if there's questions on either side, whether it be the district special fund or the drainage maintenance budget, I think in your packs you should have a sheet that looks pretty similar to this. It's that same 3-year outlook. It might be a little more of a condensed version, I think, than what I have in front of me is the full line item. certainly, if Bonnie or Brett, if you have something, if I left out a chunk there, feel
Covered it
feel
very
free.
well.
All right.
Yeah, the M&E budget is where, you know, you're budgeting to spend most of the increase of the state funding, it looks like.
Yeah,
You
we're.
could just talk about that a little bit, just what you're thinking there.
Sure. We have some, we're going to look at a couple vehicles, and then there are also, on the water quality side, just to kind of prepare ourselves for what we think is coming through the H2 Ohio funds, is maybe look at some sort of a variable rate or precision tillage tool that we could go ahead and make available on a rental basis to landowners to kind of get started on that. I want to wait on that. We budgeted for it, but I'm going to see just where the H2 Ohio dollars really lead us and whether that would be the right place to go. There are a few districts out there that are adding staff. I think unless there was a real gap in that district's operations for us, it would be premature to add staff because I really don't know what person I'm looking for, what type of person I'm looking for to fulfill those obligations to come. So we'll start with equipment. For us, it'll be, we've got a couple older vehicles it's been time to go. Probably some upgraded survey gear, things that we'll use regardless of where the H2 Ohio dollars lead us, but certainly a need today.
So they committed to a significant increase in funding, they haven't really detailed how they
No.
tend to hold you accountable?
No, and I'm going to use some rough big numbers because I've heard a lot of different stuff. It's somewhere between $90 and $100 million split between the Ohio Department of Agriculture, EPA, and the Division of Wildlife. I think I've got a pretty good beat on where the ODA is going to go with the money. I think they're going to try to model what they've been doing in the western Lake Erie Basin with landowners there would be my guess. The last we heard, they're going to start kind of a pilot program with that in the Maumee River watershed, and then expand on that out into the entire western Lake Erie Basin, and then hopefully go statewide. The big leap is the need statewide is greatly different. You start talking into the southern Ohio, western Ohio, the Dayton area, that's a lot different territory than we've been so focused on the western Lake Erie Basin. I think as a theory, as a model, it probably fits, but the specific practices, how you engage those landowners, what practices you might contract with those folks can vary greatly, not only regionally, but just county to county, what that looks like. So I wish I knew. We've been on the edge of our seat as our office as well as our 87 counterparts out there, hoping to know or to find out where that goes. And the Division of Wildlife, obviously they're in the wildlife habitat business. I think there'll be some opportunities there that we can certainly tap into. EPA, I don't know. They're watershed planners. Think about the big picture, so there'll probably be some dollars available there. And we have lines to us as a soil and water district. We would have lines and partnerships and do work with those agencies now. So it's for us. It's more those agencies are thinking about individually where that money may go. For the district, we're all thinking about all three of those. So we could see a chunk of the entire $100 million or whatever whatever that number turns out to be. The other big question with that to me is just the sustainability of it. This is the governor's talked about a 10-year program there. Without some endowment or bonding or something, I wonder, that can go away as quick as the governor's administration came in.
Yeah.
That can go away as quickly. So it's just I think it's a fantastic opportunity. I think obviously from the water quality, environmental, and how we engage other partners in that, it's fantastic. It's the right way to go. But where do we go with that? How's that actually play out?
Stay tuned.
That's
Yes,
right, that's
yeah,
right.
yeah.
Stay tuned. So, in the interim, just the bump in state match, and I've said before, and just in conversation as well as in this setting in the past, that the local governments carried a pretty big load for soil and water conservation districts, and just across the budget as well. So for us to be able to kind of take a step back from that's a welcome relief, I think. Hopefully that continues at the very least.
I applaud you for not just going out and saying, okay, with this money, we're just going to hire more staff.
No, sir, yeah.
Cautious and say, sustainability of the funding source.
That's come and gone too many times over just my brief time, and when I talk to other folks that have seen the 30 years previous to that, this is not new, so we'll see where it takes us, but prepare yourself as best you can for the challenge ahead, but don't, we're not going we're not going to jump into something right away. I want to see where this takes us.
The ditch program continues to grow every year. Do you see an increase in growth or steady growth as we've seen, or what do you think?
We are, as Rob said, kind of like the road projects, as so goes the drainage that goes along with the subdivisions that are creating the necessity for the roads. It's all hand in hand. We're taking on new projects, weekly. I mean, there's no stop, and obviously the development community's kind of turned back on in the county from what we had a few years ago. And coupled with that, that program, we started down that road, we're 21, 22 years into having a drainage maintenance program. So we're starting to see a few of those projects or elements of projects that are starting to show their age. You're starting to get out of the honeymoon period, as we like to call it, and things start to become a little more, you got to pay a little more attention to things. So it's coupled, it's both. So even if we stop taking on new projects today, the workload will increase just because of the aged infrastructure and more maintenance needs to go ahead. So that's part of, it's maybe not as apparent. A lot of it's buried underground and not obvious where we can go down a bumpy road and say, hey, we need to do something with this. So, yeah.
Certainly, the aging of the systems is a problem throughout the state. Do you have any idea, like, what the other counties are doing? I have a feeling their programs are not as robust as ours.
Most of the other soil and water districts, what involvement they would have in the drainage maintenance, they would be the more rural, more agricultural projects. There are a couple districts that are involved in the more urban side, with more similar model, but wouldn't nearly have the extent of the program. What are we at, Brett, 90?
550.
Yeah, the total value, the infrastructure is 90.
Infrastructure value, 116 million.
We cracked 100 million a little while ago, which is, I think the districts participate on the maintenance side of things, but actually thinking about the budget, it's more of the labor force in the other districts and not really trying to look at setting that schedule of special assessments on the project. So we're definitely out in front of that. We get, I would say, I don't know, it's got to be once a month. We'll get a phone call from another district or county engineer's office that are asking about how we put that together and how that's working, and just the whole, and not only the maintenance side, just the petition. You three see far more new, those 6131, the more traditional projects than any other group of commissioners that I'm aware of. So, yeah.
Sure seems like it.
Yeah.
No, and that's just part of it. I mean, I think when people see good results on the maintenance side, that's part of that.
Yes. Yeah.
Not that you're necessarily, people come to us and with a drainage issue. I mean, we're not out, kind of actively marketing that. But when we say, yes, we've done a project that's similar to that and can go show them the fruits of that we actually follow through with what we say we're going to do, that's probably our biggest sales tool, as it were, to have that be the case.
Yeah, it wouldn't grow if you weren't doing a good job.
That's right. If complaints or if your phone was ringing and people were upset with the work that was going on, that would certainly put a damper on those new projects coming on, absolutely.
You said it's mostly word of mouth as far as new projects?
Almost universally. There are a few landowners that have farms or lands that they pay into the maintenance or have gone through the process that will, they're well versed at that. But most of those projects come on that one of our technicians, we get a phone call, hey, I've got a drainage problem. One of our technicians meet them on site, and it's just simply something they can't fix in and of themselves, or even maybe just a couple neighbors. We try really hard if we can get the 2 or 3 or half a dozen neighbors together. If you can really have an effective, lasting solution to save going through 6131, right. It's not easy. I mean that's no short task. I mean it's a lot of work for us. It's obviously time consuming and just to get through the whole viewing and hearing process. But unfortunately, most times or a lot of times, those drainage problems are just of significant scope that it's just not something that a landowner or 2 or 3 are going to pull together. Even in the ag community, you think 2 or 3 farmers, this is a lock, we're going to get on board, and everybody will just kind of come together and do it. And even times we struggle to see those smaller group projects through.
Yeah.
How many projects do we have, I'm going to say in the queue for lack of a better word, projects that have been approved ultimately by the commissioners in the second hearing but are not finalized yet?
Projects that are past the first hearing,
Or second hearing even?
projects that are past the second hearing that are awaiting construction currently would be two.
Two's all?
Yeah, the
How do you
rudder,
have between the first hearing and,
I guess three, if the Rudder East project is complete, we just haven't finalized the easement and everything for it. The Rudder West project, the contract's been awarded, you acted on that, I believe, last week, and then we have the Thomas project, which is currently out for bid. There would be 13 then projects that are between the first and second. 12 projects between the first and second hearing, and then we have the two projects that have not yet had the first hearing.
do you find the time frame between the first and second reasonable? The reason I ask is if somebody's home is having an issue and they have to go through one more season of water in the basement or whatever, are we moving about as fast as reasonably possible? It makes sense, or?
We are moving as fast as the Soil and Water District has the capacity to move. Our staff is pretty maxed out at this point. And I will say most of the projects we are getting done in that 2-year time frame that we tell people to expect. There are some projects, just because of the complexity or just the sheer size of the projects, that they're just gonna take longer. And I don't know that there's, even with more staff, I don't know there'd be any way of getting around that because of the complexity of them. Just a lot of moving
I don't
parts.
want to throw resources to something unnecessarily. I'm just curious, is it reasonable to pace we're at a reasonable pace, I guess is the question.
The other thing I would add to that, it's been about 4 years or so ago, we had a couple a retirement in the office, and just in thinking about that, the staff that we kind of backfilled with, we hired more on the technician. They were new. They've been on staff for 3, pushing 4 years at this point. So they're really getting to the point where they're kind of fully functional and up and running. So our capacity has been growing over the last few years to do that. So that's helped. That's been a big part of just picking up the pace.
So the turnaround time theoretically
Is getting shorter, but there's just some seasonal limitations in that, the survey design, wooded projects, there's just other complexities that can come up as far as the other, just landowner or just coordination things that can put a drain on the bigger projects. I'll say our average project, we're at a pretty good spot of working through those at this point.
Any other questions? Administrator Fromer?
Yeah, just one, more of a comment. I think that, Commissioners, you're going to see in the years to come more of a partnership between regional sewer and soil and water. When they talk about water quality, it's the runoff off the agricultural fields, and it's usually the nutrient-rich, the nitrogen and the phosphorus. And the one thing that the treatment plants get hammered with and limits is nitrogen and phosphorus. And so as they continue, our limits are already currently some of the most stringent, in the state. And because we affect Columbus's drinking water so significantly, you're going to see that continue. And one strategy to mitigate improvements would be to work out in the watershed with soil and water to stop the,
Columbus is going to assist us.
I'm sure that they will gladly, partner with us.
Can't
Bonnie, if you want to talk about the RCPP project that we've had, or the city of Columbus has participated in, that'd be
We currently have a 5-year grant through the Natural Resources Conservation Service, U.S. Department of Agriculture, and Columbus is part of that grant. And they do provide us with some money to help with outreach and promotion in the watershed to try and get people in the upper Big Walnut to adopt conservation practices on their farmland. That grant will be wrapping up, but we have been discussing expanding that a little bit or narrowing it down to some of the lands that they actually own in this county and trying to get their farmers that lease the ground to adopt all those conservation practices as well. So we're in the brainstorming stages,
great.
but we do have a really good relationship with their watershed group.
Good. Anything else?
You looking forward to and planning on moving to the Bixby campus?
Yes.
Please,
yes,
as soon as possible.
yes, we are.
I thought that's what you'd say.
We're at capacity at our current office space. We moved in there in 1996 with just a few of us and a third or so of the building, a quarter of the building. And it's just parking and the whole deal. It's been good, but it's time to go, and we're gonna be in a great space. I think and I know you've heard this, the customer service that's gonna allow and the coordination that we have with the other agencies,
Yes.
code compliance and county engineer's office, that will be a fantastic thing. And I'm happy to see a lot of meeting space built into that. It seems like nobody's on an island and just a lot of collaborative work, and it's.
Is your current lease month to month, or?
We have been month to month for a while now, so that's, won't be an issue when it's time.
I'm sure I could find it in the lease on that's soil and water expense, or is the county paying it? or-
No, we pay, our board has contracted with the owner of the building, so.
In the new courthouse over here, we've expanded Jennifer Walraven's space to include more petition laydown
That's
area.
good.
Oh, my
Yes.
God.
And a touchdown
Yes.
space for you to sit
Probably
over
needs
there,
it,
so.
yeah.
And a new lateral file.
Yeah, we're gonna work drainage petition into her new job title.
Boy,
Did you make a satellite office for me?
Yeah.
yeah, that's right, yeah.
I'll echo Scott's sentiments about the new building and more from, obviously from a customer standpoint, it's going to be great. From our standpoint, I would say between myself and Matt Lanham, our drainage maintenance field coordinator, and Scott and Bonnie and others in the office, we're in almost daily communication with the engineer's office, with code compliance, with regional planning, and the ability to, instead of having to pick up a phone and arrange a meeting, to just be able to walk down the hall and talk to them face to face. That's just gonna, I'll say, be a great thing. Looking forward to it.
Well, I would like to thank Clerk Walraven for all she does, because she has stacks, that's a really good point. I mean, she works on this so much, and everything is all perfect. And she gives us everything and takes care of you all, so thank you, Jen. You do a great
I'll echo
job.
that.
Yeah.
Yes, I will absolutely echo
do you
that.
think if she
And
had-
Sarah as well.
And Sarah, oh my gosh, yes, yeah, Sarah too.
Do you think if Jen had twice as much space, though, she would be cluttered or not? I'm curious.
It's all up here, right?
Put one somewhere else.
I-
Who calls about that box?
Yeah, all the different boxes, and it's all organized, yeah, yeah.
And I just want to add, we've said this countless ways, all three of us. I think the relationship we have with soil and water and the professionalism, and, it's a difficult time when these petitioners come to us, and we're trying to find that balance. And I think because of the job you've done, and we had one this year we had a critique on about how the math was done, but and you listened. The residents of this county are being well served by the job you're doing, and all the people that are assisting in the engineer's office, and I'd like to think the commissioners played a role in that as well. It's an insurance policy that I think is pretty darn cheap in the scheme of things. At least that's how I choose to look at it. So I appreciate all you guys do.
Yes, absolutely. And I guess there is a bill that's been introduced in the legislature to allow for more technical expertise to be used, such as drones, as we've already been able to use in some cases.
Unfortunately for Commissioner Benton, they will still require us to read the first hearing report. That would be one thing I would be in agreement. I wish they would change.
I'm going to just make this comment. Yes, we've heard those before, but the people in this room, that's the first time they've heard it.
You're right.
And I think it's important, it's got to be read at least that one time. Otherwise, we're operating with more information than they have. And so one's a good compromise between two.
Franklin County doesn't read it.
Yeah, they don't do very many either. Which I think is kind of exemplified by the one we worked on together. But seriously, guys, you guys do a great job.
Yeah, thank you very much.
We do a lot of informational meeting before we get to that viewing or hearing on those projects, and that's something I know that, I mean, since really, we did maybe a project or two in the absence of an informational meeting, but we appreciate, we've sat through a lot of hearings, different, commissioners over the last 20 or so years, It is a tough spot, and we appreciate the spot that it puts the commissioners in to try to, that's a tough decision. We certainly appreciate that. And we go to great lengths at that informational stage with the landowners to engage that process and be here to testify and to speak. That you need to, for you to do a good job and to make a good decision, you need to hear that. And we carry the message, hopefully wisely on your behalf, that you want that. You expect those folks to be here to speak. And I think that helps, that they think, well, it's not just a decision that just is going to be made, lightly or not, that's an important part of that. And
Sure.
you to carry the ball. Like I say, I see a lot of business come before the commissioners, and that, in my mind, that's the toughest things that a group of commissioners face. There's no doubt about it. Yeah.
Well, thank you, and that's it.
Thank you.
Thank
you,
you.
guys.
And we will recess until 3 o'clock. Welcome, everyone, to our afternoon, our 3 p.m. Budget session. And I'd like to welcome our recorder, Melissa Jordan.
Thank you, Commissioner Lewis. Yes, Melissa Jordan, County Recorder here to discuss our 2020 budget. And I have just placed in front of you pamphlets with most of the stuff that I emailed you, but some additional items as well. And we'll go through those and, of course, ask me any questions as we go forward. The main reason we're here is in the 9 years I've been in office, I've operated either a flat budget, I've decreased my budget, or had very modest increases. And so for the first time, it is a marginal or a fairly large increase for me in my office, but it is purely compensation. And I wanted to be able to come before you and just show you where that's going, why I think it's valid, and discuss just some historical perspective with respect to why I think it's necessary. So it's kind of a two-part request. The first part is I did an overall, and we'll go into more detail on this in a minute, I did an overall kind of market analysis of where my staff's pay levels were, and historically the recorder's office has been one of the lowest paying offices in the county. And I'm going to talk about why I did a market analysis, what factors I used, what I considered, and then where we brought them up, and why that's important. And that goes into the budget increase. And then the second factor is kind of, filling a vacancy and adding a part-time person, and why I think that's necessary. And I'll talk about what I compared us to, and why I think that that's also justified. In front of you, the first thing that you'll see is a chart on the percent change in budget with respect to the recorder's office. And this is our recorder's operating account. This isn't my self-generating fund, which is the tech fund, because this is where we're paying salary out of, and this is what's responsible for the increase. So I show you from 2009 to 2020 the percent change over the years with respect to the budget. And I took office in 2011, but January of 2011, so the budget had already been determined. And then my first actual budget that I was responsible for was in 2012. And you will see that there was a decrease there of negative 8.76%. And a lot of that was due to the fact that we were able to renegotiate, send an RFP out, negotiate good terms with a different vendor, switch companies for our indexing system, ultimately saving taxpayers quite a bit over prior accounts. And that savings has continued. We're still actually operating on those same figures from that same original account or contract today, which competitively speaking, other recorders are not enjoying that same savings. And then we had a marginal increase in 2013. Again, I cut my budget in years, either cut it or maintained a flat budget in years 2014, 16, 17, and 19. You will see that I made only nominal increases in 13, 15, and 18. Again, the 2020 budget is purely compensation, and everything else, if you were to look through my budget justifications for this year, are flatlined and have been flatlined since 2012. So all the expenses, the general, the items that we would purchase in the office, printing, travel expenses, memberships, all of those things are flat or a very nominal increase at all. And in my justifications, I will often say this is the same as prior years, and then I go on to list all the prior years that I've ever been doing a budget. Moving on to the next kind of graph. I wanted to show you what the recorder's office's expenses, revenues, and money to the general fund looked like from years 2006 to 18. And the only reason I stopped at 18 was it was a full year that I could report. Now, I know that this is small, but I wanted to get the graph in there so you could see the actual number, or the chart rather, so you could see the actual numbers and not just try to guess with the graph, even though that's a nice visual. And again, I took office in January of 2011. There were lower on average expenses from 2011 to 2018, if you actually look at the numbers. That trend continues into 2019 year to date, which I don't have charted here. We had higher on average revenues from 2011 to 2018. Again, that trend is on par with the growth in the county for year-to-date 2019 as well. And we had higher money going into the general fund from 2011 to 2018. As you know, the funds from our office do fund a lot of other offices, and we're a revenue generator, not nearly as much as the county treasurer, but we definitely turn money over to the general fund for everyone to use, and I want to continue bringing in revenue so we can do that. Just for perspective, I went ahead and included how much money we have actually sent to the Ohio Housing Trust Fund in the state of Ohio. I always like to bring that up because it was enacted by the state legislature in House Bill 95, became effective on August 1st, 2003. Upon that, the fees doubled immediately, and that doubled amount was sent to the Ohio Housing Trust Fund for allocation to various projects outside of Delaware County at the recommendation of a non-elected advisory committee. Collections over 50 million go to balance the state budget under ORC 174.
What's the revenue generate? I mean, how do you generate revenue for that?
They enacted legislation to double our recording fees overnight the day before August 1st, 2003, your fees were, we'll just say $15. You woke up on August 1st and you recorded something in the recorder's office, it's now $30, and that entire difference goes to this Ohio Housing Trust Fund.
Okay, okay.
For random projects, they used to have a chart telling you where things went, they took that down, there's not a lot of transparency
None of it
there.
comes back to Delaware County, I'm assuming.
Very little comes back to Delaware County. It's a huge topic in the ORA. It's a foregone conclusion that we can't repeal it, but I always like to make note of it. So there's that.
So the doubling of the fee in 2003 generates $1 million a year?
I literally have, so if you look down on this chart here, in 2006, the recorder's office sent $1.3 million to the state of Ohio.
Housing Trust Fund?
Right, for the Ohio Housing Trust Fund, and I've heard various stories about the kinds of projects that has been used on, and I won't bore you with the details here, but I'm sure sometime that would be an interesting conversation. And as you go across, you can see 1.1 million, just under $1 million. It's directly tied to filings, by the way, because it's a doubling of the fee. 1.6, or I'm sorry, 1.06, 1.1, 1.3, 1.4, 1.5 in 2017, just over $1 million in 2018. And we get 1% of that back, so we'll have revenue under our revenue, I don't think I have the actual detail brought back, but we'll get 1% back every quarter to the general fund from the Ohio Housing Trust Fund. So that's just a comparison, just showing you how much we generate to the general for county purposes, how much we bring in revenue, how low our expenses are in comparison, in my opinion, and then just what we're sending to the state of Ohio for various allocations by a non-elected advisory committee. The next page, under the red tab, is a market analysis, wage increase, basically justification. And what I did was comps from similarly situated folks across the county in various offices. And I will talk a little bit more about that. I got this information straight from the auditor's office. We looked at the deputy recorder position pre-adjustment and post-adjustment. We looked at the auditor and considered their real estate assistants. At the advice of Kelly Tennant, she said they were the most comparable. We looked at general support staff for the clerk of courts. We looked at deputy treasurers and board of developmental disabilities support folks. And then just as an outlier, I included custodians, which are under the county commissioners. Let's see here. Some of the factors we looked at was anybody, I averaged every single person under each pay class with that title who had 3 years or more service to the county, and I don't care if you were here 20 years or 4 years, you were included and your wages were averaged. Some of the considerations that I thought of as I figured out who would qualify for consideration here as a similarly situated individual were, these are skills that you learn on the job in most of in these positions. There's a high school diploma or an equivalent generally required. There's no advanced degree necessary for these positions. And then I thought there are very unique factors for deputy recorders that don't apply to some of these general support folks, just to further delineate between the type of work that the staff in my office does. So beyond general support, there is specific knowledge required of people in the recorder's office. You need to understand that the Ohio Revised Code 317 dictates your position in the office. In fact, deputy recorders are a statutory creation. They aren't just a position that we opened up and we're filling that. They are a statutory position. They need to understand 317 with respect to documents that we file, the complexities and detail required to index, key verify, and complete fee those documents. They need to understand the grantee-grantor filing system, which is both in the books and online. They need to understand every aspect of our niche software. It's not just Microsoft Office that you can buy off the shelf. It has a very specific purpose, and you have to understand how to use it to properly file, index, and scan documents. Indexing itself is very complex. It requires a thorough understanding of document types and how they interact and relate to each other. This goes beyond any kind of general support staff person. However, I did use those kinds of folks to compare. They have to understand how to proof indexed items, to key verify other people's work, to check for mistakes, and to correct those mistakes. They need to learn how to generate and learn codes for various document types and to maintain consistency as they process those documents day after day and year after year. They have to understand how to record and index references for various document types so they can be found in the chain of title search. And I'm not sure if the Board of Developmental Disabilities are a bargaining unit or not, but I didn't even consider that as a factor because, quite frankly, I view myself and my office as competing with them for qualified, talented individuals. And so I included them in this calculation. So why was a market wage analysis necessary for our office? First of all, we want to keep and maintain good staff. We want to stay competitive as well. There is institutional knowledge and experience with my long-serving staff that is a benefit to the community and to the county at large. I have a very small staff, but there are over 60 years of institutional knowledge within my staff on how the recorder's office functions. There is experience with all document types and a thorough understanding of the Ohio Revised Code standards. I believe that excessive turnover can hurt productivity, morale, and quite frankly, it's costly because it's an investment to train and hire new folks. So even with the wage increase that I have implemented and that I am allotting for in this budget, we are still 14.5% below the similarly situated county positions pay rates, as you can see on the first chart. I want to be able to, another reason that this was necessary was I want to be able to attract new talent as needed. So pay must be congruent with similarly situated county jobs or nobody would apply to the county recorder's office, especially when the private sector is generally higher per hour. I do make the sales pitch during interviews or when I'm trying to hire an individual that county benefits do offset a lower wage, but when we're looking at similarly situated county employees, again, we're 14.5% below that, even with the increase that I've instituted.
How many staff do you have?
Pre-hiring, I had 4. We had 1 vacancy that we needed to fill.
Okay.
And I filled that full-time vacancy, and I actually hired a part-time person, which I think suits our needs at this point, versus a
Okay.
whole second person.
Okay, thank you.
So we need to be ready with new and highly trained staff as well to meet the current and future needs of growing Delaware County. We know that the report just came out. We're the fastest growing county in Ohio. I talked to regional planning yesterday. Their projections, I'm sure you've heard, for 2040. In the next 20 years, we're going to grow by over another 100,000 individuals. And mark my words, that is directly tied to real estate property filings. Our office is going to be busier, it's going to grow, and we need to be ready and anticipating it and not just reacting after the fact. We need to be able to fill the vacancies as current staff retires. I talked about just that 60 years of institutional knowledge. While I hate to see it go, inevitably people retire, so I need to be prepared for that. So Delaware County, the county recorder's office, we don't suffer as a result of that. And we must have competitive pay scales to attract all those potential staff. So that is my rationale and the comparisons that I made for the market analysis wage increase. Are there any questions on that particular piece?
Guess not.
Yeah, I have a question or two.
Yeah, okay.
If I'm looking at this correctly, your salary increased 35%?
No, my salary did not increase 35%. My entire budget request under this fund is up 28%. Let me see.
I'm looking on.
Where are you at?
500 salary,
What page are you on?
is there a page number?
Oh, there isn't a page number, but you can assign it one if you want.
This page,
It was,
Oh, you're in the ledger printout.
I don't have that with me.
yeah, this shows 35%.
Oh, I don't have that with me. I'm not sure what,
If you take out the extra pay period and the 3%, it'd be about 28.
oh, I do have that in the office. I didn't bring it. I'm sorry. That very well may be. I have it in the office. I'm not sure what that is. I'm not sure where it's at. But I do know that it was basically an analysis across the board with the comps, and then we looked at additional work that they've been doing because of the growing county and the additional duties.
Oh, I see.
So,
engaging in.
I guess I'm trying to figure out, well, you probably know this, but if you take the part-time addition you're wanting to make, what is the overall increase that you're providing for your employees?
I will get that to you. Don't have it on hand right now. I'm sure it's on a stack in my desk, I'm sure. So let me write it down. Your question is, what is the overall what?
What is the increase per staff member that you're suggesting or recommending?
I have it. It's up
gotta-
on my
it's gotta
computer and I
be,
didn't, it's up on my computer and I just didn't
Okay.
print it off.
I think this says that the salary increase is the 35, and then at the bottom, the expense total is the 28.72, right?
Yeah.
That's what, I think that's, so the expense total was the number that you gave us, and the greatest component.
Okay,
Of that is the salaries, which is 35%.
Yeah,
okay, yes, then.
Yeah.
So I guess what I'm asking is, what's the breakdown of that part-time employee? What part of that 35% is the part-time employee?
Well, part-time employees weren't subject to the raise necessarily. I gave the,
But the salary, I'm guessing, is including the extra person.
yes, and I am remiss that I didn't bring the actual chart. I can pull it up on my
All
phone.
I'm asking is, that 35%, which is represented by whatever the dollar figure is, how much of it is the new employee? How much of it is increases for your current staff?
Well,
Follow me?
there's two new staff. One is filling a vacancy, a full-time vacancy, and the part-time person is,
Well, and you can take it a step further.
24 hours.
And how long has that position been vacant?
I would say about a year. We've been doing
Okay.
more with
So
less.
you can break it out
Yes.
in three components.
We've been trying
One,
to do it more with
the vacant
less.
position. Two, the half, for the part-time, I believe you're adding. And then three, the difference would be what you're increasing your current staff, whatever that's left.
So you want to know, ultimately, you want to know what the increase is for
I just want
current
to know the makeup
staff.
of the 35%.
Yeah,
Makeup of the 35%, okay.
maybe another way of saying it, the budget for 2019 is 244,000. The budget for 2020 is 330,000. Just break down that $85,000 increase.
Oh, yeah, I will. I have it, it's up on my screen in my office right now.
I think that's-
I'm sorry that I don't have that.
And, you know, and
I do, I think I sent it to you, but I didn't print it off for myself. If I can bring it up.
That's fine, you
I
can
don't-
get it to us later.
Yeah, I'll get it to you later, but
and-
yes, it's very, I
And
can,
Commissioner Benton said it much more clearly than I did. I'm talking about percentages, and I think aggregate dollars
well,
probably is easier to
I can tell
explain.
you this much, that the total salary is under the 330. I am giving myself about I'm going to say $25,000 under compensation in case I needed to do something, in case I needed to hire another part-time person. So that's not all going directly to staff. I am giving myself a $25,000 window there in case somebody else, in case workflow increases and I need to hire another part-time person. So that is not all going to staff salary.
Well, then break that out as well.
I will break that out as well.
You know, just to break out of that $85,000.
And it's on the one Excel spreadsheet that I sent you. The actual cost of the salary with respect to the new rates and the new individuals. It's all in one spreadsheet that, actually, I think I sent to this individual here, Mr. Lutz.
Brad,
Yes.
I think, she pointed at you, the reason I used your name.
So that was the email that was sent out yesterday.
Yes, under the Excel, you can see what the total, and that's what I don't have with me, but it's up on my computer screen, and that's where you can see,
Well, while she's going through the rest of her presentation, I'll pull that up.
will you, thank you. And it breaks down exactly how much each person is getting, and I don't know if there's a percentage difference there or not, but it shows what each new salary is going to be, or hourly rate rather, or yearly rate, and then you can see what the total amount is for my actual payment as is for salary going into 2020, but you can also see that I made a $25,000 cushion for myself because I don't want to come back for a supplemental appropriation if we have a need for a part-time person or like an occasional person coming in to help for special projects and whatnot.
The filings that you do, you break them down into 4 different categories, basically: deeds, discharges, liens, and mortgages.
On the next page where I have recorder's office filings, yes.
Does each one take about the same amount of time?
No, not at all.
What's the?
There are several steps involved with filing a document, and I talk about it here. And I'm showing you comparisons of just the quantity of filings since 2006. Now, keep in mind, there are other types of documents that we file. These are the biggest, so that's why I included them here, just so you could get some handle on what we do. And all of this is relative to the economy and other influences and whatnot. But, for example, to receipt in, scan and mail check, complete fee, key verify, certify, return one document. Multiple people, while that system has been streamlined in my office, made more digitized, we now index and key verify from an image versus a physical document. There are less physical steps involved. I foresee in the future even fewer steps involved as technology improves and we incorporate some of those in the office to some level, but some of those things will never go away because I'm not going to trust a fully automated system. It is a multi-step process. I pull productivity reports. They show you how many, what each staff is doing, and you can see that this person produced this, this many items. This person produced less items, but that is a more detail-oriented, focused type of job that they have. And so each document actually has to go through each one of those categories, and each staff has input on each document to some degree. So it's a process.
What I was getting at is none of those categories seem to be increasing. They go up and down. If you look at 2006, trending of the deeds, the discharges, liens, and mortgages, some go up and down from year to year, but over the time period, they're roughly the same, maybe down even a little bit.
Well, and this is year-to-date with 2019. So we're going to probably be ahead of 2018 in deeds and discharges, for sure, because there's always, and it's always an ebb and a flow throughout the year. So at the end of the year, over the summer, we have more. And at the end of the year, we have more, it seems like.
What I'm getting at is I'd like to see some productivity
Oh, I can do that.
productivity trends, because to me, it looks like they're pretty flat overall. And it's hard to tell from a graph, but, you know, so that's why I sit back and say, well, I don't know why you would need additional staff if your activity, if your filings are flat, you know, over some
Well,
time period.
our
And I don't
filings
want to get
are-
into it now, but I just want.
Right.
That's where I would like to see, because your office is activity-driven, so I'd like
Right.
to see.
Right, and in the last year, we have had a vacancy, and we've been trying to do more with less, and we are to a point where we aren't able to provide the timely service that we were able to provide with that additional person. So we have, and over the summer, when people are taking vacations, or somebody's having, had a death in the family, we get behind on returning mail, and we get behind on our certified dates. And we want to try to stay as current as we have been in the past with our certified dates and staying current. Because, go ahead.
Well, I understand that, all that.
Yeah.
What I'd like you to do is maybe sit down with Brad and work out some unit costing, some just, because your office is perfect for cost accounting. And, you know.
Explain to me the unit costing. if
Well, I
you
don't
would.
wanna get
Give me
into
a
it
dummy
here. Brad-
version of it, okay.
Yeah, Brad can.
No, but the bottom line with filling this vacancy and adding the .5 persons is that for the entire last year, while we have cross-trained and had people doing more than they needed to, there were things that were lower priority that we weren't able to do. We were able to handle the functions over the counter. I come in on weekends and get the mail done. Like we are stretched very thin with 4 people. And the growing rate of Delaware County. We needed that 5th person for sure, and the .5 person is necessary for making sure we can get these things back timely. We got, over the years, we were improving workflow. I cut down from 6 or 7 staff to 5 for several years, and 5 is the sweet spot, I think, for the most part, but we were able to keep document turnaround to 2 or 3 days, et cetera. Since this summer, we've been doing more with less, but we got stretched too thin with 4 people. We're handling the stuff over the counter, we're getting things back, but it is not in the timely fashion that I want to keep and maintain. Yeah.
What I'd like to do is just have you sit down with Brad. and
Oh,
go
I'm
through
happy to, yeah.
Work up some productivity numbers and
Sure,
trends.
sure.
It should be fairly easy to do.
Oh, yeah,
Help me understand.
Sure. And as you know, Delaware County is the highest growing, or fastest growing county in Ohio, which we've said. I have a typo here. That 17.6 is not correct, so disregard that. The future growth is imminent. Again, we're going to be experiencing a projection from the Regional Planning Commission of another 100,000 people in 20 years. We need to be prepared to handle that. It will all be directly related to real property filings. And if we are expected to provide prompt, accurate service to the residents, we need to be able to have the staff to handle that. I've attached just a county growth list here from the 17 to 18 year, and you can see that there are several counties, and I'm sure you've seen this many times, that are down, several that are flat, and of course, we are the highest with, and one of the ones that I've compared us to for staffing is one that's pretty comparable to us, actually, in a lot of ways. Warren County, they're 3rd on the list, 1.4. I'm sorry that this blue is so dark. On my screen, it looked almost like a teal, so it printed much darker, so that contrast is hard to see, so I apologize for that. The next packet is an analysis that I did with similar counties with respect to their population, their ratio, the docs that they file, and then ultimately how many staff that they have. So just to go through some of this, and that's why I included the actual numbers, because again, on a graph, it's hard to see the actual numbers. These were recorders who self-reported these items to me. They were pulling reports on their own and letting me know these things. So what I did was I included Butler, which is an outlier, and because they're larger than us, but just for some perspective, Claremont, Delaware, Greene, Lake, Stark, Trumbull, and Warren. And I did a population ratio per employee as well, and we'll talk more about their staff in a minute. But before I filled my one vacancy, we were at a ratio of 51,000 residents to 1 county employee. And I know that we're not dealing with all 50,000 people coming in and filing a document, but just for perspective, our ratio was 51,000 to 1 Delaware County recorder employee to deal with those kind of documents. After I made the adjustment to the 5.5, we are now at 41,000 to 1 ratio. We are one of two of the top highest ratios in these examples here. Claremont is similarly situated with us as well. They have the exact same ratio. However, they file, 6,000 to 10,000 documents less a year than we do. And they're also slower growing. As you can see from this chart, they're only growing at 0.6, while we're growing at 2.1. Butler County is I'm going to go ahead and rip this off so I can read the staff levels while I'm doing this. Butler County has 10 staff, and their ratio is 38,000 population to 1 employee. And they're planning to process this year about 58,000 documents. Greene County, now this is not necessarily reflective of their actual ratio, but I have, their ratio is 30,000 to 1, and they'll approximately handle 21,000 documents this year. So almost half of the documents that we file, and they're about 35,000 population less than us. And so they're processing half as many documents, and their ratio is fewer population to staff. And we'll talk about their staff in a minute. Lake County is 230,000. They're not much bigger than us. Their ratio is 26,000 to 1 employee. And they'll approximately file 32,000 documents this year, which is less than us. And of course, they're a larger county, but they're only growing at 0.1%. Stark County was another outlier. Their ratio is 39,000 to 1, still lower than ours, even with our additional staff. And they're actually going to process not much more documents than us, but 45,000, which is about 9,000 less than we're going to process, and they are growing at negative 0.1%. Trumbull County, they're about our size, 198,000. They are actually shrinking at 0.8%, negative 0.8. They have a population to county recorder ratio of 32,000 to 1, and they're only going to process 25,000 documents this year. Warren County, very similar to us. She has a very nice system there, and I pick her brain on a regular basis. 232,000 folks. She's going to process about more than us. She's going to process 44,000 documents this year. They're actually number 3 on the list. They're growing at 1.4. And her ratio is 38,000 to 1. So how I calculated these averages is I basically calculated by dividing the total population by current staff, and if an office employed a part-time individual, that person was counted as 0.5. And so when we talk about salaries, the significance on the salary chart here is Greene and Trumbull counties utilize staff in addition to the ones that I'm reporting here. They utilize staff for imaging, digitizing, and scanning documents above and beyond the number that I'm talking about right here, and my staff does all of that. We don't have additional staff that handle those types of responsibilities. So Greene County, while I'm saying that they have 5.5 staff, those are who they're considering those as recorder staff, but they're actually having 3.5 additional staff handle things that my office does, scanning, digitizing, and imaging documents. Same thing with Trumbull County. Trumbull County, the one that's shrinking by 0.8%, and they will process 25,000 documents this year. In addition to their 6 staff that's handling people over the counter and whatnot. They have 4 additional staff who help them with the imaging, digitizing, and scanning of their documents. I'm not even including them, those additional staff, in this chart because they're not called recorder staff. In those counties, those individuals oversee what would be our equivalent to the record center, and they send all of those items to the record center to handle. Warren County has 4 full-time employees, and as I mentioned before, part-timers were considered 0.5, so she has 4 part-time staff, which I think is wonderful, but it's hard to find folks who are willing to do that. I spoke with her today, and she said that is a reflection of that historical institutional knowledge, those people deciding to retire, and then they later decided to come back at even a lower pay rate, but part-time because they didn't need the insurance. So she kind of she has an ideal situation there. And I really like the idea of part-time staff, if they don't need health insurance and whatnot, just from a cost savings perspective, I think it's great. And also, why commit to a full employee if you don't think that you need them? It's a nice incremental step to test the waters. And so she's got 4 part-time staff in addition to her 4 full-time staff. So Delaware is very similar to Warren County in growth. I mean, we are growing faster than Warren, but they made the list. I mean, most of these counties are negative or flat or point something. So Warren County is one of our peers in respect to that. And other similarly situated sized counties, rather, they're not growing at all or at statistically insignificant rates with the same or higher numbers of staff and similar or less filings, fewer filings.
May I make a comment since we're looking at this chart?
Go ahead.
You said outliers a while ago. A couple of them were
Right.
outliers. See, I would look at it differently. I'd say you have some that are underperforming counties.
Oh, I agree.
So it's just a matter of your perspective. You're smiling down there, I think. So, and it really, it's not really not what the level of performance is. It's how well we're doing in relationship to what our requirements are. You added a 5th person, filled a vacancy. When did you do that? End of the year, during the year?
At the end of this year.
Okay, so you really had 4 during the year, and you now have
Right.
5 just recently.
Right.
So I'm just making an observation. I would like to see, my perspective would be how that 5th person is picking up the workload, and is there really a need for that part-timer that you're talking about adding? And you really, since that person just came on board, you worked with 4 last year, now you've added a 5th that you had in your budget, but you didn't fill it. And I commend you for that. But it would be helpful if we could see how that 5th person is transitioning and the workload they're performing. If there's a need, I don't think the commissioners are going to say no, but I'm privileged to be here many years when you've been up here giving your budget, and you've talked about how proud you've been about the level of performance you provided and the productivity you've had, and I applaud you for that. And now we look like we're kind of taking maybe a half a step back, and it's just an observation from the presentation you've given in the past and the presentation you're giving today.
Right, and I just want to make sure that we are prepared for the growing county. We are able to respond promptly to the folks coming in with documents over the counter and mail. And I have noticed that while I have avoided filling that vacancy this year, we suffered as a result of people taking their necessary vacations.
And I grant you that, but if you had
Right.
4 people you worked with last year, I know you had a 5th place you could have filled, but now that you've added that at the end of the year, you've added 25% to your staff at the end of the year for this upcoming year. So all I'm saying is, how does that 25% increase in staff affect productivity?
Well, it's too late, it's too soon to tell because
Well, I
there's-
understand.
right.
That's my point.
Right,
That's
you're
my
exactly
point.
right, you're exactly right. But what I foresee is that we will get caught up with the things that have been put off that weren't priorities. They're not necessarily statutory obligations, but they're things that we should be being able to focus on at some level. But also maintaining the document turnaround to our prior levels before we got behind this summer, and have that part-time person who's willing to float and be available during other people's absences, so there is no lull. Because even with 5 staff, we still played catch-up when people were on vacation. Because we've done cross-training, but there still are folks who are extra proficient in certain areas and less proficient in others. And so when one of those proficient people are gone and I have somebody who knows how to do the job covering this other area, there is still a lag, and it takes us time to get caught up. And I want to close the gap between filing and returning documents and getting certified. I want to get back to where we are perfectly current like we used to be, before we had a vacancy and before we got behind occasionally. And you're going to have that, getting behind when people take vacations. But I'd like to keep it as tight as possible. And when I have the symbiotic relationship of the 5, that's a sweet spot. However, with the 0.5 additional persons, we can cover those vacations, we can cover those extended illnesses or sick leave when a family member's sick or a parent dies, and also have an individual available to do some of these things that are necessary in the office, but they're not the day-to-day priorities, and I don't want those to be forgotten. I want to keep maintaining and providing good service for the county. And so this is a proactive step, and all I can see is Delaware County getting bigger, and I've shown you how, and you know that the county's getting larger, and we have to be responsible and proactive and not reactive to that. And I worry that if I'm not being proactive in getting people into the office and trained in some of these areas that are very detail-oriented and very specific, before current staff decides to retire, we're going to have inevitable errors and a huge learning curve, bringing in somebody new or several people new and training them at that point.
So how much would a part-time person cost?
I know what her salary is. They're coming in at $14.50 an hour, so whatever times 24. Do you have that?
About fif-
$14
15,
50 cents
16,000.
an hour, it's annual salary of $30,160, plus the related benefits to that, so there's PERS.
I'm sorry, how much?
Just round up, say $33,000.
Well, that's a full-time, that's my
That's-
full,
That's full-time, you're
that's
saying?
my new full-time position. And then the part-time position is also, yeah, my
It'd be half
full-time,
that then.
About,
my
okay,
full-time position also agreed, except, right.
okay, thank you.
I applaud the job you've done. The only thing I'm trying to suggest is you've added 25% to your staff from what you had for the bulk of last year. It'd be good to see how that falls into place. Another question, did you use overtime last year?
No.
Okay, so say I can play it either way. The overtime could now come out if you had it, but if you didn't have it, you apparently didn't need it. So,
Well-
in theory.
In theory, we didn't need it, but there are, that's what the recorder's for. I come in on weekends and nights and government holidays and do the extra work, which I'm happy to do. And I'll always find something to be done, even if we were perfectly caught up. But the point is providing the prompt and accurate service requires us to be within a certain sweet spot, in my opinion, from the 9 years that I've been in office. And we tried it for a while, and I prefer for us to have the quick back-to-back turnaround that we had in the past with the 5 staff and having a floater for these unexpected and unpredictable absences, sicknesses, illness, vacation, stuff like that, because it's a lean staff even with 5.
You've undertaken some new initiatives, the Good Deeds Initiative, which is very popular. And, that's super, something that people don't think about and don't really know about. Does that take up any extra time?
Not really, it's mostly
Okay.
me. That's mostly me coming in and doing all of that. So
Okay.
on the evenings when staff will come to an event, for example, we use flex time. So if they want to come and help print deeds or organize people and help people understand where they need to go, find their deed, things like that, I give them flex time for that. So, and that's usually just every 3 months for 2 or 3 hours in the evening. So for 2 staff, and then they can just leave early 3 days that week or 2 days that week or something like that.
Okay.
So no, it's really not. It's pretty much all on, it's what I'm doing, it's my initiative, and I'm not really requiring much of staff for that.
Okay, that's a very valuable public service.
You know, we're processing the RSVPs for the November 25th event at Big Walnut at 5:30 and 7:30 p.m. I think the mail just hit this week, and we're getting tons of RSVPs, and basically I'll be in here pulling deeds 15 hours on a Saturday or something, which is fine, coffee, you know. But yeah, and very positive responses to it, and I
That's
think it
great.
shows collaboration between various county offices, and it's mostly sweat equity, and that's another thing. We're able to do stuff like that, I don't even have to reflect that in the budget, because it's sweat equity. It's not even, it doesn't cost
Yeah.
anything from my budget to just go do these things.
To do that.
Yeah.
Boy, well, thank you. Any other questions? Okay. I think that is it. Thank you so much for
Thank you,
coming in.
And I'm going to send a summary email summarizing what you guys are requesting, and just confirm or deny that or add to it, so I can get you the information that you're asking,
Okay.
okay?
Okay.
If you have any questions, let me know, I'll be happy to.
Sure. Maybe I might have a clarification question at some point.
Okay. And we will recess this meeting then until November 19th at 9:30 a.m. We are in recess.